Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Grip-Birkman Coaches Cafe. It's great to see you here. If you're joining us by recording, we hope you're going to enjoy the discussion that we have, and I do hope there's going to be a lot of dialogue about this subject, something that's very practical, useful to us, and timely as we talk about getting our tank filled, trying not to run on empty, and some practical tips that we'll be sharing with each other about how we get our tanks filled and what do we do to try and keep our tank from being empty. So with that, let me ask us to get started with a word of prayer. And Ken DeMar, I'm going to ask you if you would, can you unmute there, and would you lead us in a word of prayer to get us started?
Would love to. Lord God, you created us in unique and wonderful ways, and we are so grateful for that. And we also understand that during times when things are tough, we do need renewal. We need an ongoing sense of your presence, and we have this wonderful tool that helps us fill up our tank and to keep us healthy and moving forward and serving you well. Thank you for every person who's on this call this morning. Thank you for the chance we have to just dialogue together, to be able to talk to friends and new acquaintances literally around the world as we gather together. Thank you for this technology, and thank you for the privilege of being this in and part of this community. We'll give you all the thanks and praise. Guide our conversation and our fellowship together today. Amen.
I had hoped that John Blake might be able to join us, since John was the original author of the article we're going to be talking about, but we're not afraid to talk about him and his article, even if he's not able. He said that with another commitment that he had, he wasn't sure if he'd be able to be present. If he is able to join us later on, then we'll certainly want to drag him into this quickly. But right off the bat, let me just say this whole subject of getting our tank filled is very relevant to Grip-Birkman, as all of you are aware, because of the way that we talk about needs, expectations, how we get those met in order for us to be in our best behavior. So just a quick review. I'm going to share a screen with you to just remind you of that illustration that we had in the article that came out last week. Good. So as we look at that illustration of the gas tank of our needs and how those underlying needs come from our relationships and the environment around us. You know that illustration that we've used in every coach training, and a lot of you, I'm sure, use that often in your coaching, about the fact that our needs are hidden, and so they are not seen by other people. And that's why the arrows come inward. It's how we are receiving the information, relationships, conversations, everything that we're receiving from our environment, how that is coming into us and how we are receiving it, how we're perceiving it as well. Not only receiving, but also perceiving. Just about that particular subject, how important that is, because when those needs are being met, you know that our illustration with the Birkman method particularly, when those needs are met, then we are in our usual style of behavior. We've got gas in the tank, as John put it in the article. And that means we can be showing that positive kind of behavior with those straight lines that are going out. And that is observable by other people. They see our behavior and it looks the way it should. It's our usual, our productive style, the way we have learned to best get things done. But when those needs are not met, that's when we go into that stress behavior. And we use those squiggly lines, remember, to illustrate that, because it also is visible, but it's visible in a negative way. This is a negative way that we're trying to get our needs met. We go into another style of behavior. That style, that our usual good, positive, productive style of behavior didn't seem to be working for some reason. The need is not being met. So we kick into this stress style, which is not seen by others as pretty, but it is an attempt for us to get our needs filled, for us to try and get our tank filled up. So to speak, we might be pulling up to the wrong tank, to the wrong pump to try and get the need filled in the best way that we could. So with that, let me just ask, what kind of comments do you have, or even questions for the rest of the group from what you read in the article there? Let's just open the mics up, and with free conversation, what do you have to say about that? What struck you about it? What impressed you? What kind of struggles are you going through with this? Or how are you meeting with a team right now that might be going through some struggles and you might want some counsel from the rest of the group? It's just completely open mic, guys. Have at it.
One of the things that I have leaned heavily on and have advised others is, as best as possible, do something that looks sort of like the routine you had before, so that you have something that's comfortable. I know for the first 3 months when everything was shut down, for most of the first 3 months, I still went to my office even though the church was closed, for part of every day that I would have normally been around the building. Wasn't that I couldn't do what I was doing at home, but it made me feel more normal even when I knew I wasn't.
It made you feel more normal, you said, Les?
Yeah, it made me feel more normal, even though I knew I wasn't. Some people say I'm never normal, but it was helpful having something that felt like before.
Would you say you were kind of looking for an anchor there? I don't want to put words in your
I
mouth.
think I was, because everything was so fluid, and some things changed like twice a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and things still are not really completely stable, are they? I mean, we're still in that volatile world of uncertainty, and there are still things. Nothing has really settled in. Although maybe we've found some sense of normal for now. We're getting used to it, perhaps now, right? Yeah. Someone else. Thanks for that, Les. Yeah, and that's a good thing. You went back to something that was familiar, hanging on to that one thing that was familiar, your office. And hey, in your case, you were changing offices at that time, weren't you?
Yeah. Every time I went, I brought home more books.
Okay.
One of the things that I notice as I look at this diagram is that when I picture it like this, the usual behavior, the good stuff, and the stress behavior seem further apart. But what I realize in my own life is that those things aren't very far apart at all. And that sometimes I don't recognize right away when it moves from usual into more negative stress behavior. And sometimes, particularly if it's a longer time like this that we've been under, maybe some pressure, I'm not always real quick to notice even about myself. And I've seen that it's been really helpful to have some things where I can evaluate how things are going, or maybe have some honest friends speak into my life that just kind of help me recognize, because I'm just trying to go on. And sometimes I don't recognize when the tank gets empty right away until it's really empty. And so I found it that there has to be some time for me to take and just kind of do a self-evaluation at times. Where am I? How is that tank doing? And how's that going?
Hey, Matt, you talked about having friends around you too. Do you have some friends around you perhaps that have learned enough about this that they can help to recognize when your tank is empty in some cases?
Yeah, I don't know. They don't know I'll use this language, although
Yeah,
some
right.
of the ones on my team, we've certainly been through this and have used it regularly in our team building. But yeah, they're able to help, and I'm able to help them too. I think it's a mutual thing. We've worked together for enough time that we can help each other, just kind of see, hey, you know what? It seems like maybe there's some tough times, or how are you dealing with this right now? It seems like maybe there's some stress that's going on, and just those kind of small, kind, people are very kind, but clues to say, hey, maybe I need to just check into this on myself. I feel like I have to keep running, but maybe I need rest. Maybe that's what I need, or maybe I need some friends around me. Maybe I need to pull away, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Someone else.
So one of the things that we did with our staff was once COVID hit, we sat down with each staff member and looked at what area of their needs was most likely going to be disrupted as a result of COVID. And so that was a really interesting conversation, because when you look at the different quadrants, there's elements of COVID's activity and disruption that really impact people's needs in each of those quadrants. You know, if your need is green and you need people and you need to be actively engaged with people, and now you have all been sent home and you're working remotely, and you know, so you got those kinds of stresses. If you're, you know, if you're in the yellow and you love things to be ordered and there's a flow and all the rest of that, well, COVID, you know, it just blew that up completely. So one of the things that was really helpful for us was sitting down with each of our staff and talking about how COVID was impacting what their needs were, and then trying to come up with ways that could kind of counteract that and still give them ways to engage in healthy ways. And then, of course, to sit down with them and talk about the stress and whether or not they were seeing any of those canaries flopping over in the coal mine. But we didn't use just needs. We went into the components and we identified certain components where those needs might in fact be at risk because of COVID. And then we also looked at their stress reports and gave them some of the coping skills that come out of that to be able to build some resilience back in. But it was really helpful for each of our people to be able to say, okay, yeah, this is where COVID is probably going to impact me and result in some trouble for me with respect to my needs. And now what am I going to do about that? Because that gives you the opportunity to name it and then to try and come up with a way to intervene against it. And that's been really helpful. And that was just stage one for us. We've gone to another stage as well, which maybe we'll talk about later, but right now we're focused on needs.
That's really good, Les. And I threw up there on the slide just to remind us from the standpoint of the Birkman map, those generalized needs. And I do appreciate that you mentioned digging down into the components, because sometimes the averages on the map don't explain completely the kind of behavior that we're seeing. And when you dig down into the components, like somebody whose diamond might be in the yellow, and we start to identify them as a yellow person, which that's not accurate either, but their diamond might be really close to the red, and we're starting to see some of this red kind of behavior out of them, and wondering, whoa, wait a minute, I thought you had yellow stress needs, and you're doing this red thing. Well, because it may be close to the red, and they may have that one component that's pulling from the red that could make that. So if you've got that opportunity, I think just about everybody on the call today is at that level where we could be using the components. But yeah, that's an important thing. And if you are just using the map with them, and that's as far as you're going with a team, you as a coach just need to kind of watch out for the fact that sometimes there might be something that doesn't seem to fit. I'll just go ahead and throw up the stress behaviors too for those, just to remind us a little bit. Like, you know, the person might be looking really pushy and bossy, and I thought that they were supposed to be down here in this introverted kind of behavior, and it sort of seems like they're in some extroverted behavior. Well, that's coming out of some particular component of behavior that's not showing up on the map. So you just kind of watch out for that and just say, yeah, in this case, that's true. So let's just talk about what that stress is, and more importantly, what's the need that needs to be met. That's not going met, right? Yeah,
and we found, I would say, I don't think there was a single case where we found that the looking at the components and the needs in the components didn't add some additional insight. It always did, and just shaped the thing a little bit and gave them a chance to go a little bit deeper. So yeah, it was helpful. But the primary and fundamental way is to look at the needs and the stress off the map for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you can really and truly identify what is that need, when the person can actually start to verbalize it, right? Les, I'm curious while we got you there thinking about that, because you've worked with some teams over a period of time, where it's not just a one-shot deal with the team, but you're continuing to come back and keep revisiting this. How long would you say that it would take a team for them to start to feel comfortable with that kind of language?
Well, I think for us, the tipping point for what you're describing comes after everybody's had their own individual conversation and they've had their team debrief. And so that really becomes probably the first tipping point. And then the second tipping point is when the supervisor begins to bring the Grip-Birkman into their meetings with their team, both individually and as a group, so that conversation keeps coming back. And as that happens, that's when it really begins to be part of the conversation. And so then it's not as big a deal for us to come back to that when something like this happens, because you don't feel so much like you have to dust it off.
Yeah.
And I think that's.
Go ahead, please.
No, it's good.
So do you do any extra coaching with those team leaders then, in terms of how they can use this with their people?
Yeah, like I sat down with all of our supervisors and coaches that have been through the Grip-Birkman and said, okay, this is how we're going to approach this with COVID. And so we went through all of that information about how we're going to process needs, how we're going to look at stress, how we're going to look at some of the component issues and the stress reports. And then now we've actually just in the last month started a second phase of that, looking at it not from the standpoint of stress, but from the standpoint of, okay, you can look at it in terms of filling the bucket, in terms of having your needs met, but you can also look at it in terms of filling the bucket by making sure that you're giving attention to your interests and ensuring that your gift expression is happening in a useful way, so that you are experiencing that power, fruit, and joy. So now the conversation's flipped over for us to the other side, where we're talking to each of our teams about the interests and the gifts, as opposed to just the needs and the stress. And that's actually just starting now. But again, that was something where I sat down with all of them. We worked through that and then said, okay, let's go have conversations with our teams about that to make sure that they are actually doing the things that do motivate them and give life to them, because some of them have stopped some of that in this season, and that's just not that helpful. So I think we can look at filling the bucket from both ends, and that's kind of how we're approaching it.
Yeah, I threw up there the interest just to remind us of those 10 areas of interest. And, we talk about high interests becoming need and low interests being aversions. So those low interests can, if we're getting too much of that in our life, then obviously that can start to drain us, can drain the tank, and that might be part of it. But also the tank can be drained if I've got some really high interests that are going unmet. And wow, in this COVID season, how many people, might have had that high persuasive, let's say, and they really needed to be with people, that strong green extroverted thing, or the social service, and they felt like they were not able to do that. Maybe their social ministry even shut down, perhaps, if we're talking about those kinds of things.
With ministry,
yes,
most of our people would feel like they're in a good place of fit, but then all of a sudden, when COVID came, a lot of their jobs got disrupted. So now they're not necessarily functioning in that sweet spot, and that has an implication on them. So we have actually an assessment we do every quarter that talks about, how do you feel like your gifts, strengths, and talents are being utilized, and we score them on that. And so now we're having a conversation around that. How well do you feel like your gifts are being utilized? Where are you seeing that power, fruit, and joy? And what needs to be adapted to ensure that that's happening? Because that's also tank filling. And so that's starting to be a really good conversation, just coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah. By the way, guys, with this little illustration up, one of the things you can do with this that we do in coach training now and signature training is take this, simple little PowerPoint, throw it up on the screen, even just a PDF, just throw it up on the screen there, and then let everybody share their annotations. So if you want to, even right now, if you'd like to do that with Annotate, if you can find the Annotate tool on your Zoom screen there, and click on text, you may have to do a format thing to get the letters big enough and make it be something other than white. And then you can come and on the screen there, you can type where your high scores are, as I am right now. Oops, that's not my name, is it? You can tell I don't have good typing skills. And you can, put that thing wherever it goes, and have the whole team put theirs in there, put their top scores for their highest interests above the color. If they want to get really creative, they can even, format the text on it and put it in the color there if they wanted to. If you guys want to do that right now, just to kind of practice it, this is a good way to do that. And when you get them up there, your highs and your lows, we can start to see the team of where are these guys getting their tanks drained? And as you start to see some of those less, has the low persuasive, the low social service. And so anyway, if you do this with a team, you can then also from the Zoom with the controls on the annotate, there's a little button there for save. When you save it, it saves it, I think, as a PNG file. Wherever you've told it to save the thing, you can even tell it what to show it in the Finder or show it in the folder where you've saved it. And that can give a team leader just a quick reminder of, oh, here's where my team is, here where their high interests are, their low interests. And oops, we've been piling on a whole lot of this kind of stuff on this one person that might be overloading them. And we might need to look about shifting some responsibilities around for people related to that. So I'm glad you mentioned the interest thing there, Les, and how important that can be in this. And also you mentioned spiritual gifts. How many people in this COVID season have felt like their gifts were being suppressed because they were not able to be out and to see, those physically next to people administering them. And I just like to maybe go on that track for just a minute, guys. What kind of ways have you seen that the inability or people's seeming inability to exercise their gifts the way they had up to this point, their inability to do that, how is that draining them because they're having a struggle, and how can they exercise their gifts, or their gifts are not being properly exercised right now? How are you seeing that happen?
Larry, I'll take it the other direction.
Okay.
Instead of not exercising it, but a person who used the COVID downtime to reflect and think about how to make better use of their gifting.
Great.
Before this call started, I got a message from a new supervisor who said, hey, this person wants to develop some greater competency in an area of artistic therapy. And to use it as a ministry outlet because of the COVID stress and the people that they're relating to, and also some things that are going on in their host country. And when he mentioned the person, I remembered being their coach, and I thought, I remember her score. She had an off the chart artistic score. And so I looked it up to be sure, and she was a 99 in her area of interest. And to me, it was just an affirmation to say, yes, that's a good step forward, investing in her in that way, letting her put those gifts to use in light of what's going on around her. Not only will it be a blessing to her, but she has the natural inclination to put that gifting and that investment to work immediately because it's going to fill her tank.
Yeah.
And so that's the positive side of someone being self-aware, and then a leader being able to inform another to say, hey, this actually fits. It's a good thought. Go for it.
Wow. Yeah. Does that spark anybody else's thought?
So we in our world right now, we tell people, hey, you got a job, but you don't have a job description, because things are it's complete mayhem, right? So there's some kind of, for some personalities, there's some fun in that. For some other personalities, that's completely freaking them out. But the reality is we've found that it's helpful to talk about the gifts in terms of that issue of, where are you seeing that power, fruit, and joy right now? And how has that changed in relationship to how you would have seen that pre-COVID? And then how do we get your gifts, if they're not functioning at a high level right now, how do we get back to that, 65-35 kind of pattern for you? Because when you're experiencing that power, fruit, and joy, that is life-giving, that is tank filling. And so we just need to keep working on that. And it's been a good conversation.
Yeah. I notice in our church, in the first few weeks of COVID, of course, the first week or so, it was pandemonium and people just trying to find out where was there any place to step that wasn't quicksand. But after a couple of weeks, the creativity started really kicking in. And for some people, I think, like you said, Les, for some people, this was an adventure and they were getting into it and, finding creative ways to do things. And it was fun. And hey, guys, let's make the best of this. But when they realized this was going to go on for a longer time than they thought, not just a couple of weeks, but it was going to go on not even just for a couple of months, it was going to go on for a much longer time. Then some people started getting discouraged, the creativity started waning, and it started coming back to the thing of when can we get back to the way things used to be? How soon can we get back to having services? How soon, we all want to come back to church, as they put it. We all want to come back to be able to shake hands and hug each other and sing together in the congregation. So how quick can we get back to that? And so much energy went toward that we started losing some of the creativity that I think we still need. We still need to be creative in this present that we are given. And looking around to see that some people's tanks have been drained again or more rapidly, and how do we help them to get those tanks refilled? And one of the things that I'm trying to really encourage is help people identify what their gifts are, and then what can you do given this circumstance? Don't think about what you could have done in the past or what you might do in the future. Right now, what are some things that you can do to exercise your gift, whatever that gift might be? And let's just sit down and try to be creative about finding ways to do that. That takes a lot of energy, though, from the leader too, doesn't it?
Larry, taking the tank illustration, it's been a long time for many of us from those university days when we would pull into the gas station and only have a few dollars to drop in the tank and could only go so far. And but I think that's something that's happened to our people, is that they're used to being able to, in a normal situation, pause, fill the tank all the way up till the little handle clicks, swipe the card, and it's all good, and pull off, and they're good to go. And we probably need to find some ways to say, what are some ways you can do the well, it's only going to be a quick fill, but make the most of it. To take the few gallons when you can get it and rejoice in it, be glad. You may have to stop more often, but when you get those chances, make good use of them, and be more intentional about it, because you don't have your natural rhythms of stopping for the full tank, so to speak. That's probably the hardest thing, is if we're used to topping off, it's hard to just feel like a few gallons is going to be what we need. But if you go back to those university days, sometimes that's all you had, and you got where you needed to go, and it worked for you. So we may need to revert a little bit and get back to that, get what you can get with what you have and be happy with it.
That's a really good point, Shannon. Yeah, and that thing about you may not be able to totally top up, right?
Jump in here, Larry. Some of us had an agreement in college that if we shared a vehicle, you always had to leave at least $1 worth in your tank. Now, I don't know if anybody else had that agreement and ran into trouble with that, but I'll just take you to my very first date trying to impress this girl. and running out of gas because someone did not put their dollar's worth in. Now,
Mark, I want to ask how full the tank was with just $1's worth back then, but
well, back then you got gas for $1, but what I'm saying with this is, if we're depending on others to fill our tank, we're going to be in trouble.
yeah, if we're depending on others to fill our tank, expand on that just a little bit more, Mark.
Well, it's just that we must be self-aware and caring for self. We've got to listen to Jesus' invitation to come away to a quiet place. Because if we ignore that and thinking we could just forge on ahead because, by the way, my diamond's in the red and I'm going and doing, and I don't care for self, and I'm depending on others to fill my tank, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
There's another thing that I've run into, Larry. I had lunch the other day with another pastor who told me he doesn't like people. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, I really like COVID. No one's in my office. No one's bothering me. I don't think I like people. Maybe I need a new career. And I'm like, whoa. And he's not familiar with Grip-Birkman. So, I've got my napkin and I'm drawing the map and I'm showing where my markers are and explaining how I survived, because I felt that he was probably not too much different than I am. And I said, maybe we need to do a little bit more about this, but I'm wondering how many people are processing COVID and making faulty self-evaluations based on their response to what's going on. I still don't know what this guy's going to do. I'm just a little bit fearful that he's going to walk away from a church that seems to be thriving because he doesn't think he likes people.
Well, the truth of it is, I know a lot of leaders, a lot of pastors who truly are introverts. They have learned to operate in an extroverted world. I was in seminary with some guys, and I've known some pastors since who said, I will pastor a church because it gives me a pulpit. I'm really called to preach. They don't have the shepherding gift as much, and they have the proclamation gift, they may be prophets, they may be teachers, even good administrators, but they're not extroverts, and they don't necessarily have those kinds of gifts that we think of as being the more outgoing kinds of gifts. And so for him to have that pulpit, now he says, hey, I don't have to do those other things that I had to do as part of my job that for him probably should have been the 35%. And is enjoying that. The question becomes, though, how does that perhaps cripple him? If we stay down there in that need area, in this case, it sounds like it might be some really blue kind of behavior on the Birkman map. So if he stays down there all the time and he's getting his tank full, but he's not getting out there with his diamond of his usual behavior, or he's not allowing his dotted diamond to pull him out where his spiritual gifts would be pulling him, and he's only doing that, then he's hurting himself tremendously there too. And sure, he can start to become so inward thinking that he'll become even depressed over it and defeats his purpose because he's not feeling his purpose in life. So yeah, I've seen some of that too. And by the way, I can identify with that. I was kind of, feeling heaven a little bit in the beginning of COVID with getting a whole lot of me time. But I also realized I needed to get out of that. Hey, anybody else have something about that? Or maybe another tack that we haven't taken yet that you wanted to take? I want to be patient, because what I want to show you here, since I've got a few slides to share, I'm just going to show you another one real quick. If another thought comes up, but oh, by the way, you see what happened when I brought that slide up, that our names stayed up there from the stress behavior. So what you do need to do is you do need to clear, and as the host, you are able to clear all the drawings from that once your exercise is over. Sometimes you want it to stay up there because you might throw a different slide up that you want their annotations to stay on the second slide, but you do need to be sure and clear it once it's done. Okay, that's enough teaching from that standpoint. Let me just share this fast and simple first step. It's really 2 steps that you can take to getting the need met when we're looking at the map. And this is also going to have some implications for us to look at our spiritual gifts. First of all, identify the stress behavior, then go to the opposite quadrant to start getting out of the stress. This is a conscious, I need to get out of my stress. So I'm going to do something that is totally, completely opposite, regardless of where my diamond is. It's the opposite from where my stress behavior is. I'm behaving this way right now, and to get out of this bad behavior, I need to go to the opposite quadrant so that then I can come back and get my need met. So let's take as an example, then I'll just run quickly through them. For the red, stress behavior, pushy, bossy, impatient workaholic we saw back there in that illustration a while ago, because the need is for action, right? This is review for you guys, so I'm just going to breeze through these. So now go to a blue kind of behavior. The blue behavior might be to stop and reflect, slow down, consider if this is the best course of action. And then once they have done that, then you take the third step. Okay, I've done that to get out of the stress behavior. Now the next thing I need to do is get back to wherever my red need is that was going unmet. I needed some action, so I've gone down there and I've slowed down a little bit before I take action. But now I'm going to go back and I'm going to see what we need to do to take action and make sure that action is not working against us. So the next one will be the green stress. Might be talking too much. They become distracted, selfish actions, peer pressure, because the need that's going unmet is the need for interaction with people. Are we seeing any of that right now still with the COVID thing? They want to commune with the group, they want to talk it out, and they might not be able to have enough group activity. So in their case, go down and consider what the consequences are, but be sure they're going to do it the right way. Don't just, jabber with the group and then mess up and have to go back and redo something over again. So think about the consequences before you speak up. Then once you have considered that, now come back to whatever it was to interact with other people in a positive way to get the need met. Remember, we're talking about need and stress here. So the stress for blue, we talked about procrastinating, becoming discouraged, socially invisible, overthinking things, which might be less what you were seeing with that pastor there. But the need is to withdraw and to reflect and generate ideas. So to get me out of the stress behavior, I'm going to go do something. I'm going to take some kind of action. I'm going to get up and get moving. I'm going to get dressed perhaps and not just sit around in my pajamas. Or I'm going to work on a project. I'm going to do something to get the ideas going. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to reflect and work on the creativity part of it, whatever that blue need is. For the yellow, might become too rigid. They may become dogmatic, very policy oriented and resistant to change. And of course, that could really be some stress they're going through with this constantly changing world that we're in right now. They need rules and regulations and procedures. And so rather than just, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, and throwing the rule book out, instead, talk to somebody about it. Remember that the reason we have rules and regulations is to help people so they can do a better job. So go consult with somebody, get a second opinion on it. It's hard for them to act in this extroverted way, but reach out and touch somebody so that then together, perhaps you can get better ideas about what are the rules and regulations we do need to put in place. Maybe we just need to put in some temporary ones for right now. And maybe we need to put in some clauses that say subject to change and really subject them to change when they need to. So those are just some simple ways that we can perhaps look at getting the needs met. You want to make any comment about those 4 areas before I move to another quick thing with you? It's just
Larry,
yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Larry, I would just say that in my role in talking to a lot of seminarians and Christian college and Bible college grads looking for ministry and doing Grip-Birkmans with them, I think the kind of scenario spoken about here by Les, the introvert that loves COVID because they get to hang out with their books and they get to read all the blogs and watch all the vlogs of all their favorite preachers. I mean, frankly, at least in my experience, this is the kind of person that survives 3 years of an MDiv. This is the kind of person who comes out of the vast majority of our training institutions. This is the kind of, which is to me really highlights the importance of working with our ministry formation, both models and institutions, with a tool like the Grip-Birkman to really help people come out self-aware of these kinds of issues, because all of a sudden they're thrown into a situation where they have 11 meetings every week with a bunch of strangers that they don't know and who are not impressed with all their latest blog reading, and wonder, what has happened to the quiet of their study. So, I mean, I really sympathize with the kind of situation Les is in there, and just once again, the importance of using this tool with people coming up. The question I would have is, what do you say? How do we head this off? How do we encourage, frankly, just more green, red people to stick with, ministry formation and pursue all this? Maybe that's the wrong question, but anyways, I just see a ton of blue, yellow people who are in this room today, and we need all of us and you in ministry for sure. But I just see what Les is talking about more and more.
Yeah, anybody have any comment for that?
The only comment I would make is self-awareness is so vital. I mean, this guy panicked thinking he had missed the mark. And apparently up until COVID, without even understanding his personal makeup, he was somehow managing to thrive. And COVID put him in a situation where he realized that the thing he'd been hired to do was something he didn't miss not doing. And it just kind of freaked him out a little bit.
Yeah.
So he didn't understand himself.
So helping the people to become self-aware and socially aware right now is as important as it has ever been, isn't it? Anyone else?
Well, I think we have to think about our context here, because the reality is that this is a long-term kind of low-grade anxiety producing disruptive thing that has no end in sight. And so we're not talking about an event that we're trying to work with somebody to get through. We're actually talking about a disruption at a level that none of us have ever experienced before. And so I think one of the things that we have to be doing with the people that we get to serve is we have to be finding ways to be continually coming back in and investing in and checking up on these people, because the reality is, I think the COVID is putting everybody under stress. It's disrupting everybody. And because there's no end in sight, there's a certain amplifying factor because of that.
Yeah.
And so people need more support. They need more attention. So that for us, for example, this isn't we're going to sit down once and we're going to do this and everybody's going to be fine. We're actually quite concerned that the mental health elements of what's going to happen as a result of COVID are going to be quite devastating for a lot of people. And we're trying to find ways to make sure that our contact level with the people that we support is going up, is more frequent. And we're using these tools, not just these tools, but we're using stuff pretty regularly to try and make sure that we acknowledge the reality that people are facing. Because the person who's sitting there going, gee, I kind of like the introversion. I love being able to sit at home and work remotely and all the rest of that. Disruption is just going to keep coming for that person.
Yeah.
And so how do we continue to step in and be that support and help them process that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest questions for coaches of any kind right now. There's a wide open lane for us to be investing in people's lives, and people are going to need it for a long time, I think.
I absolutely agree with you, Les, that this is going to be a long time. I think it's going to be about 3 years before we are at a point where people feel like this is a normal that perhaps I'm comfortable with now. I think it's going to take about 3 years for that to happen. And people don't like to hear that. In fact, I get shut down a lot of times when I say that, and I have to be careful not to say it too often out loud, but that's just my prediction, because of the fact that we're in such a cultural change here now, and for us to, when we still don't know for sure what the culture is going to look like. It's still forming and reforming and deforming and unforming and reforming and forming again. So you know, while we're in this volatile world of uncertainties and unclarity, I do think that that quote, I think I heard Patrick Lencioni say it first, but he wasn't original with it either. I haven't been able to find the origin. But that quote that says, what people need is not motivation. What they need is clarity. If we can have clarity of our purpose and what we're about, then the motivation will automatically come. We don't have to get people motivated if they've got clarity about what it is they want to accomplish and clarity of purpose. When we can help people to discover that, and I guess that does lead me to the last slide I wanted to share with you today, finding your anchor. That, you know, where is our anchor is the important thing. And John mentioned this in his article too. He talked about particularly Matthew 11 passage and Psalm 23 and Galatians 2:6. But pick out one of those. Pick out one of those and give us a comment about what that means for you in helping people to find their anchor. How can we use this? Any one of those scriptures that perhaps speaks to you right now. And please, maybe somebody that hasn't participated yet, grab one of those and share a little bit with us. And if you don't, I might call on you.
While they're thinking about that, can I make another comment, Larry?
Sure, Ken, go right ahead.
And that is, you know, I'm just looking at this and thinking how in our original slide of a gas tank, we all had the idea that we could survive a little while in the changes that were coming with COVID. You know, when your gas tank is pretty full, you can survive quite a bit quite a bit of change before it actually starts running on the red line empty. Yeah. And I think what's happening is, well, we saw lots of stress in the first little while. This whole idea that this is longer term than we thought is actually bringing us to another level of having to address this. So suddenly finding our anchor was not at first. Finding our anchor was a temporary. Let's get through this. We can't meet anymore. Our roles have changed, and so we've got to figure out how to make this. Now, I think finding our anchor has gone to another level. We have to realize that this may be longer term. So how do we find our anchor? How do we get our needs met? How does our tank get filled in the longer term than we had expected? And I think I guess get that feeling that we're at another whole level of trying to understand how we function in our sweet spot, how our needs get met during this somewhat elongated time of stress behavior, stress situation.
Yeah, Ken, that's a really important point, because people, you know, we see this even in disaster relief with first responders in disaster relief, where that surge of adrenaline comes and they've got reserves. You know, if our firemen have been getting their 48 hours between 24-hour shifts, and if they haven't worn themselves out in those 48 hours, they come into that disaster with all these reserves of energy, and they can give it everything they've got. But then after the first tour, they start to get depleted. And if they're having to come back and work extra long hours, extra shifts, then it gets depleted even more, and the stress really comes in there. So what I heard you pointing out is to say, hey, if we come in there, we've already got a full tank, you can go a pretty long time on that tank. But if you're not stopping off and topping up that tank regularly, eventually the tank runs dry and you don't realize why, because, oh, the tank was full, I've been running on full tank, right? No, you can't run on a full tank forever because it does run down. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Mark was talking about that, the last dollar in the tank. After 6 months, we're down to that last dollar in many cases. And so suddenly the way we're responding has to be a little different than it was early on. And I love what you're doing there in terms of just coming back and dealing with this every day. Yeah. I think you're approaching it in such a healthy way that many of us haven't really thought through, and the people we're around and our own resources are not where they need to be because of that. And so we need to get back to these anchors again, but understanding it from the Grip-Birkman perspective.
Yeah. So guys, what have you thought? Learning to abide in Christ, when he talks about that in John 15, how important it is to abide in him, to stay in him, to remain in him, to be conscious of being in his presence constantly and being connected to the vine. When we get disconnected from the vine, we are fruitless and purposeless. All of that in the John 15 passage. Anybody have anything else to add to that about how important that is to helping us find our anchors and getting our tank filled and keeping it filled?
For all those years that we thought that the whole idea was to bear fruit, and all he asked us to do was abide, that we think in this COVID-19 world seems so fruitless, and his invitation is still abide. Just remain, dwell. And the fruit is a natural thing that comes when we're abiding.
Yeah, Mark, that does remind us, it's not the branches that actually produce the fruit, is it? It's the vine that produces the fruit.
That's exactly right.
It shows up on the branches.
Amen.
Yeah, good point. I have to remind myself, even when we're in a prayer group, sometimes we can be careful. We need to be careful that we don't take credit when we say, our prayers were answered, as if it was our prayers that caused this to happen and we get the credit for it, right?
I think when we think of the current reality with COVID, the long-term nature, the stress that everybody's under, I'm regularly reminded of the need that we get illustrated best perhaps in an airplane. Put your own mask on first. And so I think it's really helpful for us as leaders to remember that this is not first and foremost something that we need to be giving to somebody else. This is first and foremost something that we have to be doing ourselves. And then out of that, then we're able to be helpful and supportive of those around us. But this is going to be a season where we have to be doing this, and we have to be making sure that we put our own mask on first.
So before we can do that Galatians thing of each one bear one another's burdens, you need to be sure that you're able to carry their burden, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Someone else. Finding your rest in Jesus. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and what? Say it out loud. Unmute. Say it. Even the lowly part. What was that, Les?
Humble of heart.
Humble of heart, yeah. So we learn to be a little bit humble, learning from him, taking his yoke on us. But it is a yoke, it is his yoke, but his yoke is easy. So we have some burdens to bear. What about that thing about using Psalm 23, not just for a funeral? It is not just, yea, though I walk through the valley of death. There's a lot around that, isn't there? We need to be reminded of how we can use that psalm to help us to remember to rest, to restore, to replenish, to relax on the green grass sometimes. But we're depending on the Lord constantly, right? And then that thing of carrying one another's burdens in Galatians 6, where we do bear one of those burdens. And that is the social awareness that we get also from being aware of each other's needs and meeting those needs, and not just from the Birkman standpoint, but looking at it from the body of Christ and the spiritual gifts, and how are we able to exercise those, and how might that be draining us also when we're not able to exercise our gifts properly. Oh, and what about looking at the liabilities of the gifts and how those can come into play also, right? I see a couple of heads going up and down as you're thinking about that. And so, guys, we've come to the top of another hour. It's always amazing to me, and sometimes I feel like I've talked too much here, but I really appreciate what you guys have contributed. Does anybody have any last thought, something else that you'd like to share with the group before we sign off? Ken, yeah, please.
I was just going to say, I got a feeling that this is one of those things that I'm going to go back and listen to again and again. This is some powerful stuff here today. Thanks, Larry, for sharing this stuff. It's just eye-opening.
Yeah, well, thanks to John Blake also for that article that stimulated our thoughts today, and hope you guys will keep watching for more articles like that coming out through the website as we try to share with you, because we really do want to give you tools that will help you as you're helping the church to grow in unity, whether it's through a local church body or teams in an organization, or any other kind of way that you're able to be representing Christ out there, helping to build unity in the body of Christ so the body can be about doing the things that he wants us to do, bringing fruit to him so that more people will know Jesus. So thank you very much, guys, once again. Bye-bye.